What if I told you that the Peloponnesian War did not start with a massive clash between Athens and Sparta, but with a quarrel in a small colony on the edge of the Greek world in the 400s and 30s BC? Epidamnus, a settlement connected to Corcyra and through it to Corinth, erupted in civil strife between rival factions. Its troubles might seem minor, yet they involved powerful neighbors. The Democrats begged for help. Corinth saw betrayal. Corcyra turned to Athens, and Sparta saw a rival growing ever stronger. Resentment deepened. From such a distant spark, larger forces began to gather. But before this obscure dispute flared up, a fragile peace was already hanging in the balance. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Before we begin, just a quick housekeeping note. If you enjoy what I'm doing, a like and subscribe would be really helpful. It goes a long way in keeping the channel going. And don't forget to drop a comment. I'd really love to know what you think. How could a treaty that promised 30 years of peace collapse in less than 15? The agreement between Athens and Sparta in 445 to 446 BC, known as the 30 Years' Peace, was meant to prevent future wars. On paper, it established stability, territorial agreements, clear influence zones, and rules designed to minimize provocation. In reality, however, it depended on suspicion and rivalry rather than trust. The peace included several key clauses. One allowed neutral cities to choose either alliance, Athens' Maritime Empire, or Sparta's Peloponnesian League. Another provided arbitration, a legal process where disputes could be resolved before fighting broke out. For its time, this was an impressive attempt at managing conflict. Yet, its success relied on both Athens and Sparta respecting the decisions made. Arbitration only worked if both sides wanted it to, and a treaty, no matter how carefully drafted, could not erase memories of betrayal or the fear of being outmatched. The clause on neutrals was particularly sensitive. It appeared to guarantee freedom. If you were a smaller state, you could choose your protector. But in reality, it served as a provocation. Each time a neutral leaned towards Athens, Sparta felt its influence wane. Athens saw each shift towards Sparta as a threat to its empire. The outcome resembled a seesaw. Even slight movements on one side altered the balance, forcing the other to react. This constant tuning caused friction that no treaty could eliminate. The piece's design could be viewed as a framework with gaps left unfilled. It outlined spheres of influence, but failed to settle edge cases. What about a colony tied to one side by heritage, but leaning politically towards the other? What about an ally transformed by internal revolution, suddenly resembling one camp more than the other? Each ambiguous situation tested interpretation. Was it still neutral, or was it no longer safe to ignore? These questions soon ceased to be theoretical. Both sides also carried heavy memories. Sparta had known of Athens' ambition before. Athens remembered the caution and mistrust of Sparta. Those recollections made the peace less a fresh start and more a pause written on a page already marked by rivalry. And as long as that memory guided decisions, the treaty's best feature, restraint, was the hardest to practice. For a listener today, it's easy to imagine peace as a calm stillness. But here, peace meant a pause that had to be defended daily in debates, envoys, and arguments about the exact wording of clauses. The success of the peace depended not on avoiding friction, but on the two powers choosing to control their responses each time friction appeared. neutral cities tempted both sides to act. Local disputes could flare into international questions. Every problem risked tilting the balance. This is why historians continued to debate the treaty's character. Some argue it was doomed the moment it was signed. The ambitions of Athens and fears of Sparta made long-term restraint almost impossible. Others suggest it might have succeeded if enforced with discipline. But in either case, the mechanism relied not on parchment, but on political will. Without that trust, no arbitration clause, however innovative, could prevent escalation. Seen in this light, the 30 Years' War should not be mistaken for 3 tranquil decades, but understood as a fragile framework that lasted barely 15. Its strength lay in slowing the march to war, not in ending the rivalry itself. Its weakness lay in the very points where it seemed most flexible: neutrality, arbitration, and the delicate boundary between influence and aggression. And soon those weaknesses would be put to the test. The strain did not start in the shining streets of Athens or the plains of Sparta. It began far away, in a place so obscure that few Greeks had reason to visit it. That fragility would be tested, not in Athens or Sparta, but on a remote shore. Why did a small, troubled colony become the catalyst for a conflict that reshaped Greece? On a map, Epidamnus appears remote, perched on the northwestern coast of the Greek world, in a location few Athenians or Spartans would ever visit. It was closer to the Adriatic than to Greek centers of power, far from the bustling Piraeus or the disciplined training grounds of Sparta. To most Greeks, it was the sort of city you only knew if you traded there. Yet, when it fell into chaos, its problems triggered a chain reaction that profoundly affected the balance of power. Epidamnus was initially founded by Corcyra, itself once a colony of Corinth. These layered ties, from Corcyra to Corinth, and from Epidamnus to Corcyra, seemed minor footnotes until internal conflict in Epidamnus made them crucial. The city was divided between Democrats, who expelled many of their oligarchic opponents, and exiles who resisted from outside. This division was not uncommon, but the violence was. Fighting spilt into the streets, and the ousted faction allied with neighboring tribes to strike back. Civil war left Epidamnus fragile and desperate for assistance. Initially, the Democrats followed the colonial tradition. They appealed to Corcyra, their mother city, for support. But Corcyra refused, unwilling to be pulled into the conflict. That refusal compelled Epidamnus to turn to the deeper ancestral connection, Corinth, and Corinth agreed. When Corcyra declined to aid the besieged Democrats, Epidamnus appealed to Corinth, which accepted, and that was the decisive move. This single decision transformed the local dispute into an international issue. Corinth sent garrisons and even organized new settlers to strengthen the colony. What seemed like relief to Epidamnus appeared to Corcyra as an invasion of its territory. Colonial heritage was supposed to command respect, but here it provoked outrage. The Corcyraeans saw Corinth moving directly into matters they considered their own. The tension mattered because Corcyra and Corinth had a long and bitter history. Over centuries, they had clashed at sea and distrusted each other by principle. Corcyra had grown wealthy and proud through overseas expeditions, yet it repeatedly refused to defer to Corinth, despite their ties. Corinth, in turn, saw this attitude as arrogant. So, when Epidamnus asked for aid and Corinth responded, old resentment hardened into outright anger. From Corinth's perspective, the invitation was a chance to strike against a rival that had long slighted them. For Corcyra, Corinth's response was a humiliation, stripping away their authority over a dependent colony. Here, even a local act of defense, stepping in to protect a small city under siege, appeared to the other side as apparent provocation. Thus, Epidamnus came to represent more than itself. In practice, it became a pawn in the bigger game played by Corinth and Corcyra. Local democrats and oligarchs who had started the crisis lost control of their own city's fate. Soldiers, colonists, and fleets arrived not because Epidamnus mattered in itself, but because it symbolized prestige, rivalry, and spheres of influence. To retain Epidamnus was to demonstrate dominance. To lose it was to accept dishonor. Think of it as two powerful neighbors arguing over a neglected parcel of land. Neither cares much about the plot itself, but each knows that allowing the other to take it will shift the entire balance of status on the street. Epidamnus was that parcel. It was small, but it carried significance because of what it suggested about future conflicts. From this moment, the balance of power began to tilt. Corcyra, possessing one of the largest navies in Greece, could not let Corinth's actions go unchallenged. Corinth, already engaged on land in Epidamnus, would not retreat. Every reinforcement, speech, and ship heightened the stakes. The irony is that Epidamnus had little wealth, no grand temples, and no vast population. Its geography was what kept it in view, a frontier outpost linking Greek trade waters to lands further west. Yet its obscurity was almost intentional. Because it was marginal, it seemed easier to control and to use as a symbol of influence. That illusion drew two rivals into confrontation. Initially, this all appeared trivial to the wider Greek world, but historians remind us that in systems where prestige, rivalry, and alliances are as significant as land or ports, even the quarrel of a minor colony can ripple across the entire map. The events at Epidamnus proved this. The chain of appeals, democrats to Corcyra refused, then a plea to Corinth accepted, set two naval powers on a collision course from which neither could escape. That small decision, Corinth's response to that plea, would grow into something much larger. How did Corinth's rivalry with Corcyra attract the attention of every Greek power to the western seas? The answer begins with Corcyra itself, a city on an island along vital trade routes, whose wealth and independence depended on its navy. Corcyra commanded a fleet of about 120 triremes, one of the largest in Greece, second only to Athens. At a time when control of the seas determined access to food, trade, and influence, that fleet was more than ships. It was leverage, prestige, and a shield of autonomy. Facing this was Corinth. Once dominant in colonization and maritime trade, Corinth had been the parent city from which Corcyra had emerged. But as the colony grew rich and powerful, it showed little gratitude, refusing to defer to its founder. Corinth saw this as defiance. Colonies were meant to affirm the honor of the metropolis, not overshadow it. That tension festered for years, and Corcyra's navy, so potent and independent, seemed to Corinth a daily reminder of lost authority. When Epidamnus appealed for help, Corinth seized the opportunity to reassert itself. Officials and soldiers were dispatched, colonists were escorted, and fortification commenced. On the surface, this was a response to a plea, but beneath it lay something larger. Corcyra viewed it as an intrusion into what it regarded as its own network of dependencies. For Corinth, this was discipline. For Corcyra, it was an attack on hard-won independence. Both perspectives hardened quickly into fury. Neither city could wrest the issue. Corcyra declared war and sent its fleet to besiege Epidamnus. Corinth, unwilling to back down, prepared its own defenses. Reinforcements arrived, allies were recruited, and soon Corinth's camp had assembled about 150 ships, 90 of its own, joined by 60 contributed by neighbors. This meant the confrontation was no longer about one small city, but a clash between two of the largest navies in Greece, with numbers to impress any observer. Why does this matter? Because naval strength in this period was not only about prestige, it was the means to control western routes across the Ionian Sea, to dominate the access lanes to Italy and Sicily, and to safeguard vital flows of grain and goods. Whoever could secure or neutralize Corcyra's fleet would hold a strategic advantage that affected the entire Aegean world. This is why contemporaries understood the struggle was not just about honor. It was about the shape of power and about who could project influence far beyond Greece's mainland. You might compare Epidamnus in this context to a pawn on a chessboard. On its own, it was of minor value, but fought over by two players, the pawn symbolizes access to future positions and becomes a prize disproportionate to its size. Corinth and Corcyra invested their resources in Epidamnus, not because of its wealth or beauty, but because possession implied influence. The pawn became a benchmark of strength, and neither side could withdraw without risking humiliation. The cycles of retaliation escalated. Corinth's reinforcements were met with Corcyra's triremes. Corinth's new colonists represented dominance, so Corcyra responded at sea to challenge them directly. Skirmishes grew into open conflict, and Epidamnus became the first battleground of a war that was spreading too rapidly for diplomats to control. Warnings were issued, but swiftly countered by ships in the water. Each act undermined any chance of resolution. What made the rivalry more than a local dispute was that both cities recognized the broader value of Corcyra's navy. Corcyra was unaligned. It belonged to neither the Athenian Empire nor the Peloponnesian League. That independence made it a power worth courting. If Corinth could bring Corcyra into its orbit, the Peloponnesian League would strengthen its sea, where previously it relied mainly on Spartan land armies. Conversely, if Corcyra chose to ally with Athens, then Athens and its allies would command nearly unrivaled dominance over the waters. The ripple effects of the conflict extended far beyond Corcyra's pride or Corinth's grievances. The irony was evident to outsiders. The 30 Years' Peace was intended to restrain Athens and Sparta. Yet no clause forbade conflicts between other states, and when such rivalries erupted, their scale could not help but draw the two great powers closer. Corcyra and Corinth both understood this. Whoever won their fight would almost certainly gain a major ally. That made every decision more significant. To lose was not only to be humiliated, it might also mean that your rival would align with Athens or Sparta, tipping the balance of the entire Greek system. The first clashes at Epidamnus, therefore, revealed more than a dispute over settlers. They showed how fragile the peace truly was. Corinth's fury was sharpened by years of resentment. Corcyra fought with the confidence of its fleet and the dread of losing autonomy. Each side was too invested to withdraw with dignity, and once navies engaged, the threat of wider war seemed less a danger to be avoided than a chain of events already set in motion. Contemporaries remembered how prestige and strategy fused here. Corinth claimed it fought to discipline an arrogant colony. Corcyra claimed it fought to prevent domination, but observers saw more. Whoever commanded Corcyra's fleet controlled access to Sicily and Italy, and could influence commerce in the western seas to their advantage. Honor and autonomy were evident, but beneath them was raw strategy. Soon, the rivalry became impossible to contain. Corinth's fury hardened into resolve as its fleet grew beyond its original size with allied contributions. Corcyra's defiance grew equally determined. Naval battles broke out that rocked the Ionian waters, and neighbors took sides, forcing Athens and Sparta to reconsider where their treaties left them when allies demanded support. The peace remained technically intact, but its framework was strained as each move brought the two dominant blocs indirectly closer to the edges of conflict. Think of the 30 years peace here as a framework rather than a barrier. It did not stop the fighting. It shaped how the consequences spread outward. Corinth could look to the Peloponnesian League and demand that allies support it against Corcyra. Corcyra, fearing the scale of Corinth's preparations, could not remain isolated for long and sought aid from the east. The peace had provided structure, but no solutions, turning the rivalry into a channel through which larger tensions were drawn. Epidamnus was merely a pawn. The actual contest was for Corcyra's loyalty. Corinth was upset about the loss of respect. Corcyra maintained its independence, showcasing its fleet as a symbol of equality among powers. Once these positions hardened, they pushed events towards escalation rather than resolution. In this way, a distant colony became the arena for two naval powers to test each other's strength, a conflict that other states could not ignore. Amidst these rising hostilities, a bigger question surfaced. Under pressure, Corcyra needed protection to keep its fleet from falling under Corinthian sway. Corinth, meanwhile, already gathering allies, justified itself against a rebellious colony. Both sides were capable of fighting each other, but neither could control the long-term outcome without involving greater forces. This posed a dilemma for another power, which was observing keenly from afar. Should it stay neutral, or take the opportunity to align with Greece's third largest fleet? The decision on this would determine whether this naval rivalry remained contained or tipped the balance across the Greek world. Athens now faced a crucial decision. In 433 BC, Corcyra sent envoys across the sea, appealing for protection against Corinth. Their arrival created an immediate crisis for the Athenian assembly, challenging the fragile balance of the 30 years' peace. What Athens decided at that moment would send ripples through the wider Greek world. The dilemma was apparent: remain neutral, or align with the third largest fleet in Greece. Corcyra's appeal was impossible to ignore. It promised significant advantages, but also posed substantial risks. Accepting the alliance would mean alienating Corinth, one of Sparta's closest allies. Refusing to take the risk would have allowed Corinth to grow stronger, thereby weakening Athens in the long term. The choice was fraught with both temptation and danger. For years, Athens had practiced restraint. The ink on the 30 years peace was still fresh, signed only a decade earlier in 446 to 445 BC. The treaty was meant to prevent conflict between the two great powers, and Sparta's vigilance reminded Athenians that caution was their best defense. Pericles himself stressed the importance of patience. Athens should build wealth and strength while avoiding provocations. Every move was scrutinized by enemies eager to find missteps, and into this climate of restraint entered Corcyra's envoys. They arrived not empty-handed, but with arguments based on numbers and reach. They pointed out that their fleet was vast. In fact, Athens possessed more triremes than any other city-state. By uniting, they argued, they could dominate the Ionian Sea. Corcyra's harbors also offered access to western waters, heading towards Italy and Sicily, which was vital for grain supplies and trade. Such assets were too valuable to dismiss lightly. But Corinth loomed in the background of the offer. To side with Corcyra meant opposing Corinth. And if Corinth called upon its allies for support, Sparta could not remain indifferent. That was the core of the dilemma, whether to seize the opportunity, knowing it carried risk. Inside the Athenian assembly, the debate quickly divided into three factions. One group urged restraint, warning that even limited involvement could anger Sparta and break the peace. They argued for letting Corinth and Corcyra fight each other, believing that time would weaken both, allowing Athens to watch from a safe distance. A second group supported the opposite view. Staying neutral would be reckless. Corinth would gain strength, Corcyra would be lost, and opportunities would be wasted. Eventually, Athens would face a more uneven power balance later, tilting in Corinth's favor. Between these extremes, Pericles proposed a middle ground, a deal narrow enough for Athens to claim legality, but strong enough to prevent Corinth from overwhelming Corcyra. The form mattered. Greek diplomacy distinguished two distinct types of alliance. A Symmachia was a full offensive and defensive pact, requiring both cities to aid each other in any war. An Epimachia, by contrast, was more limited. Each side would provide defense if attacked, but not join offensive actions. After extensive debate, Athens chose the Epimachia. This was not merely a technicality, but the key to Athenian strategy. A Symmachia would have signaled open confrontation with Corinth to all Greece. An Epimachia, in Athens's view, allowed them to adhere to the letter of the 30 years' peace. They could tell Sparta they had acted defensively, not aggressively. For Pericles, this balance offered the most significant benefits with the least risk. The Corinthians were well aware of Corcyra's mission and arrived with their own ambassadors. Their speeches in the Athenian assembly carried both threats and persuasion. Accept Corcyra, they warned, and there will be war. Stay neutral, by contrast, and Athens would see both rivals weaken themselves, leaving Athens unthreatened. To them, the choice should be obvious. Neutrality maintained the peace and allowed Athens to seize advantages later. They reminded the Athenians that the spirit of the 30 years' peace demanded restraint, and that intervention would be perceived as a breach in all but name. Corcyra's envoys countered. Neutrality, they said, was in fact a silent gift to Corinth. If Corinth subdued them, then the Peloponnesian League would gain overwhelming naval strength. Athens would face a coalition not only dominant on land with Sparta, but also formidable at sea with Corinth and Corcyra combined. It was better to side with Corcyra now, while there was still a choice, rather than confront a larger enemy in the future. The assembly listened, torn between two distinct futures. The tension could be imagined as standing on a threshold. One step towards alliance promised control of the sea, but also possible escalation. One step back into neutrality promised temporary peace, but at the cost of losing strategic advantage forever. Each faction in the debate believed the other's course would lead them straight into danger. The clarity of legal terms facilitated Athens's compromise. Epimachia, a defensive alliance only, nothing more. They would aid Corcyra if attacked, but not if Corinth framed the war as Corcyra's aggression. This allowed the assembly to claim adherence to the treaty, while still protecting Corcyra from being crushed. The decision was close, but ultimately, Pericles' careful approach persuaded the majority. Athens would act, though only within limited bounds. In practice, Athens sent a squadron west to accompany Corcyra, not to initiate combat, but to serve as a warning. If Corinth attacked Corcyra directly, Athenian ships would intervene. If Corinth limited itself to raids elsewhere, Athens would remain on the sidelines. Legal precision became military orders. The Athenians aimed to appear cautious while subtly moving closer to confrontation. Why take this risk? Because Athens believed the benefits outweighed the dangers. Corcyra's fleet bolstered its naval dominance. Its alliance blocked Corinth's expansion in the west, and its protection helped Athens maintain influence over vital waters for trade and food supplies. Thus, Athens wagered that it could act defensively, adhere to the letter of the peace, and still prevent its enemies from gaining strength. The analogy is simple. Picture a tightrope walker on a windy day. One foot moves out carefully, the other follows, the balance pole steady. To advance, each step must be precise. Athens thought it could cross, but all around, political winds gathered, shaking the rope beneath. A defensive pact was firm on paper, but less so on the waves of the Ionian Sea. Corinth, predictably, did not see much value in the distinction between Symakia and Epimachia. To them, Athens was committed to Corcyra, whether the words used were defensive or outright. Perception mattered as much as legality, and in the eyes of many, Athens had aligned itself with their rival. That alone was enough to ignite anger and spark calls for retaliation. Meanwhile, Athens believed it had carefully drawn a line. They told themselves they had not rushed into open war, nor had they abandoned Corcyra. They had chosen a middle ground, protected their interests, and adhered to the letter of the treaty. In their view, caution had guided their actions. However, history shows that the middle ground carries its own perils. By selecting the Epimachia, Athens had set limits designed to offer protection. Yet limits are only practical if both sides respect them. Corinth was unlikely to interpret such subtleties with generosity. Now their fleet would sail, and Athens would find out if this carefully planned compromise in the assembly could truly limit tensions once ships met on the water. Would that cautious middle route actually maintain peace, or simply invite misunderstanding? In 433 BC, events reached a boiling point at the Battle of Sybota. This was where the fragile balance Athens had tried to maintain between caution and commitment was tested on open water. Corinth and Corcyra brought their fleets face to face, while Athens provided just enough presence to make a statement, but not enough to appear as though they had committed fully to war. Athens's contribution was deliberately modest, exactly 10 triremes. They did not expect to win a battle with such a token force. The aim was deterrence, not conquest. By sending only 10 ships, Athens hoped to reassure Corcyra while signaling to Corinth, and through them to Sparta, that they had no intention of waging offensive war. This was as much diplomacy as it was military aid, a careful balancing act designed to keep Athens within the bounds of the defensive pact it had signed. The squadron was positioned at the far end of the Corcyraean line, more as overseers than active participants. To emphasize neutrality, Athens appointed 3 generals from different political backgrounds, including Lacedaemonius, son of the pro-Spartan statesman Cimon. This was a gesture meant to signify national unity. This was not one faction's reckless gamble, but a carefully measured Athenian policy. To outward appearances, the Athenians were there to observe, not to fight. Then the fleets clashed. Corinth fielded about 150 ships, many drawn from their allies, against 120 from Corcyra. Wood thundered against wood as hulls smashed and rams cut through planks. Triremes locked together, becoming floating battlefields, with soldiers fighting with spears and shields across gangways slick with spray. In sheer numbers and experience, Corinth had the advantage. Gradually, the Corcyraean line began to falter. For Athens, the dilemma grew more acute with each passing moment. Holding back meant honoring their promise of restraint, but it also risked leaving Corcyra defeated and allowing Corinth to seize its fleet, the third most powerful in Greece. Intervening might save a vulnerable ally, but would seem to shift Athens from cautious deterrence into open provocation. Corcyra reached its breaking point. Their fleet was faltering, and defeat seemed inevitable. It was only at this stage, when collapse looked unavoidable, that Lacedaemonius issued the order. The 10 Athenian triremes advanced into the path of destruction. Their force was small, but tactically significant. By blocking Corinth's march at the moment of crisis, they prevented a decisive rout. Corinth hesitated, surprised to see Athenian beaks now arrayed against them. That hesitation gave Corcyra the chance to regroup and stabilize the line, transforming what might have been total defeat into survival. The Athenians did not turn the battle into a victory for themselves. Their intervention had one purpose: to prevent the destruction of Corcyra's fleet. They achieved this, but in doing so, they crossed from symbolic guardianship into direct engagement. To Athens, it was still a matter of defense, still within the pact signed in the assembly. To Corinth, it was something entirely different. Corinth's commanders saw not restraint, but a hostile act. The Athenians, they claimed, had betrayed the spirit of the 30 years' peace. Corinth asserted they were disciplining a rebellious colony. Instead, Athens had stepped in to block them. To Corinth, it appeared as arrogance, the same arrogance they had long accused Athens of, now displayed not only in the Aegean, but on their own doorstep in the west. The number of ships no longer mattered. One Athenian hull on the line was too many. Athens thought otherwise. 10 ships, no more, no less, had been chosen with care. Too few to alarm Sparta, enough to stand in front of Corinth. In the Athenian mind, this was balance, the art of appearing moderate. To Corcyra, those 10 ships had been just enough to keep them alive. To Corinth, they were proof that Athens was poised to push further and further. Numbers, so carefully debated in the assembly, turned into symbols seen differently by each side. The battle itself ended without either fleet claiming a clear victory. Corinth inflicted damage, but Corcyra remained afloat. Corcyra lost ships, but not independence. Athens kept its promise to defend without unleashing a full offensive. Yet the final count of hulls sunk mattered less than the stories carried back home. Corinth told its allies that Athens had interfered where it had no right to do so. Athens told its citizens they had obeyed the letter of the law. In the struggles of perception, law mattered little. Reputation, suspicion, and complaint mattered most. That was the legacy of Sybota. It transformed a feud between Corinth and its colony into a matter directly tied to Athenian power. Corinth now had something tangible to carry, evidence, as they saw it, that Athens had violated limits. Athens had rescued Corcyra, yes, but in doing so had provided their enemy precisely the grievance they needed. Within weeks, Corinth would carry those charges eastwards into the Peloponnesian heartland. For Athens, Sybota was supposed to be an exercise in caution, 10 ships only, nothing more. For Corinth, Sybota was precisely what they feared, Athens inserting itself into Peloponnesian affairs. The gulf between those perceptions was too vast to heal. Corinth would not forget it, and Sparta would be made to hear it. That is why Sybota mattered, not for territory gained or fleets sunk, but for the grievance it produced. A grievance that was about to be placed before Greece's greatest council. After Sybota, Corinth did not quietly lick its wounds. Instead, it voiced its anger eastward to the Spartan assembly, intent on transforming a naval defeat into a broader cause. The context was deliberate. Corinth stood before Sparta not merely as a victim, but as an ally demanding action from its protector. The Corinthians conveyed their message sharply. They accused Athens of breaking the spirit of the 30 Years' peace, if not the letter of it. They contended that Athens had acted arrogantly by supporting Corcyra, a supposedly neutral state, thereby shifting the balance of power at sea. They claimed Athenian support was not purely defensive, but a guise for expansion under the cover of diplomacy. This argument served as a stark warning. Neglect these signals today, and soon the Peloponnesian League would face Athens's unchecked naval dominance. This charge resonated deeply with Sparta's core fears. Corinth made 3 points simultaneously. Athens was interfering arrogantly. Athens was growing stronger each year, and Sparta risked betraying its allies by remaining passive. For a league based on mutual trust, these accusations struck a nerve. Corinth was reminding Sparta that leadership carried responsibilities. If allies called for aid and Sparta remained inactive, others might lose faith, weakening the unity that made the league formidable. Spartan leaders received these words with mixed feelings. Sparta was known for its caution, slow to intervene abroad and wary of being dragged into distant wars. This caution was rooted not only in temperament, but also in fear of uprisings within their own borders. The mass of helots supporting their economy was always a latent threat, making Spartan policy inherently defensive. Every foreign campaign involved the risk that enemies might rise at home during the military's absence. Therefore, Spartan instinct was to delay, purchasing time and hoping disputes might resolve themselves without intervention. Yet the Corinthian case was difficult to dismiss. Corinth did not claim to act out of personal revenge, but as a voice for the collective security of the Peloponnesian alliance. They warned the Spartans that Athenian ambitions were not limited to Corcyra. They would expand outward, shaping the very rules of Greek politics. Today, Corcyra, tomorrow another neutral. Gradually, Sparta would oversee a league caught between Athenian land walls and naval fleets. This image was powerful. Sparta had always justified its leadership as protecting tradition. Corinth's rhetoric played on that self-image, depicting Athens as the breaker of norms, a state willing to distort treaties for its own gain. The message was straightforward. Stop Athens now, or face the consequences later, when its strength was unstoppable. By framing the battle as a pivotal moment rather than an isolated clash, Corinth made Sparta consider long-term horizons, not just short-term campaigns. However, Sparta hesitated. War involved costs, disruption, and risk. Their laws, culture, and society were founded on discipline and predictability, not reckless overseas ventures. Many Spartans questioned whether Athens had truly crossed a clear legal line. The treaty still existed. The words on parchment still bound them. But as the Corinthians pressed, they shifted the argument. What use were written agreements if one side grew stronger each year at the expense of the others? Stability relied on perception. And now, the perception was that Athenian ambition was eroding the balance of power. The Corinthians presented their warning almost as a forecast. Athens had tasted success, first against the Persians, then within its empire, and each victory fed its desire for more. A power that easily intervened at Sybota would not stop there. Soon, Athens, allied with Corcyra, would control the western routes, dominate Sicily and Italy, and confine Peloponnesian forces behind a line of hostile ships. For Sparta, dependent on others for naval strength, that was a frightening prospect. Corinth urged them to act not just on what Athens had already achieved, but on what it could do if left unchecked. This prediction unsettled the Spartans. Athens was a rival very unlike itself, fiery, energetic, aggressive, and popular with allies precisely because of its confidence. Sparta, meanwhile, prided itself on restraint, but restraint appeared less like virtue and more like weakness when allies begged for help. Allowing Corinth to be overlooked would risk fracture across the whole league. Sparta's authority depended on the very image that allies' security was their concern. This tension left Sparta balanced between two poles: caution rooted in the troubles of Helots and the desire for peace, and the obligation to serve as a protector that required readiness to confront threats. Corinth's speeches pushed that boundary until hesitation itself seemed dangerous. As long as allies doubted Spartan resolve, Athens would look stronger whether it truly was or not. In Corinth's view, it was better to endure hardship in war now than face humiliation later. Sparta's leaders debated the issue thoroughly. Should they risk everything on a complaint that Athens insisted was exaggerated? Or was delay exactly what Athens relied on? A chance to strengthen its power under the cover of treaties. Corinth had adeptly made patience seem like neglect. To ignore them was to admit that Sparta could not defend its allies, weakening the cohesion of the Peloponnesian system. There was no clever analogy in the chamber, no need for imagery. The stakes were clear: alliance obligations, Sparta's prestige, and the looming threat of Athenian dominance. Pressure from Corinth forced Sparta into an understanding. It could not protect both its peace and its league forever. At some point, it had to make a choice. Step by step, the scales shifted. Sparta's preference for patience was gradually outweighed by Corinth's argument that inaction was equivalent to surrender. Athens's rising naval power did not need another clash to prove threatening. It was already visible in the size of its fleets, the boldness of its policies, and the confidence of its allies. In the Spartan mind, the real struggle was becoming clear. This was less about a single treaty clause and more about whether Athens could be allowed to grow unchecked without endangering the balance that kept Sparta secure. By the end of that appeal, Corinth had taken its bitterness and transformed it into a league-wide question. Was Sparta prepared to uphold promises of protection, or would it stand idle while Athens gained leverage across the seas? The answer was not immediate, because Spartan caution could not be shed overnight. However, Corinth had done enough to shift the conversation within the Spartan assembly away from patience toward a reluctant acceptance that confrontation was imminent. At this stage, Sparta had not yet chosen the whole war, but the ground was moving beneath them. The cautious guardians of the Peloponnesian League now found themselves pushed to consider action by the very logic of their leadership. And as the words of Corinth settled in, another truth took shape that no treaty could disguise. The growing strength of Athens was feeding a more profound anxiety among the Spartans. It is in this anxiety that the real roots of the conflict start to show. To understand why war became unavoidable, you have to look not only at treaties and naval battles, but at what was stirring within Sparta itself. Was the Peloponnesian War primarily caused by treaties and broken promises, or by something deeper within the Spartan psyche? Thucydides himself bluntly states, "The truest explanation was the growth of the Athenians to greatness, which brought fear to the Lacedaemonians." In those words, he shifted the focus from disputes over colonies and clauses to the psychological burden of rivalry. Fear, he argued, was stronger than parchments. This perspective compels you to reevaluate the origins of the war. treaties explain structure, but fear explains action. And that fear was not just floating in the air. It was intensified by material change. Athens was amassing wealth through the Delian League, collecting tribute from allies that funded a fleet larger and more advanced than Greece had ever seen. Its democracy grew more confident, pushing ordinary citizens into decisions that energized and fortified foreign policy. Meanwhile, Sparta remained rooted in its traditional ways, safeguarding its land-based strength while resisting innovation, wary of deploying its armies abroad due to the helots it kept suppressed at home. Fear did not replace these realities. It heightened them. By the mid-5th century, Athens had undergone a dramatic transformation. Within a few decades, it had evolved from the vulnerable city at Marathon into an empire. Its wooden walls, the triremes, multiplied, filling harbors with the sound of oars and discipline. Wealth flowed in through league tribute and maritime trade. Democratic reforms invited more citizens into decision-making, channeling collective pride into collective strength. Victories over Persia boosted confidence, and Athens harnessed that energy to redraw the map, freeing Ionian Greeks, but keeping them bound as subjects of its empire. Sparta could not ignore how swiftly this rival expanded. Its own model remained static, an agrarian society disciplined for land war. Its army was feared, its way of life admired and imitated. Yet the balance within its walls was fragile, always resting on the oppressive control of the helots. Sparta's attention rarely strayed from the Peloponnese. Abroad, it was hesitant and cautious. At home, it was wary and fearful. Conversely, Athens expanded dynamically outward. One resembled still water, while the other looked like a river carving a valley. To capture the feeling, think of it as an aging fighter eyeing a younger challenger. The older boxer has experience and strength, but each month the younger grows faster, taller, more confident. The fight is not yet scheduled, but already the veteran feels the inevitable. Delay sharpens the fear. Wait too long, and it may be too late. For Sparta, Athens was that challenger. That is why colonial quarrels, such as Epidamnus, or naval clashes like Sybota, carried such weight. On their own, they were not existential threats, yet they became symbols within a larger story, each affirming what Sparta already feared, that Athens's trajectory was upward, and their own relative standing was eroding. Local disputes became evidence of a more profound shift in fortune. Thucydides made a clear point. Fear prompts action when reason might hesitate. Agreements and arbitration can be debated, but dread leaps over detail. It convinces men that even waiting is a form of surrender. A treaty defines limits. Fear makes those limits feel intolerable. Athens's democratic momentum added to the unease. For oligarchic Sparta, it seemed reckless to trust policy to mass assemblies. Yet Athens appeared to thrive on this energy. Thousands of citizens could operate their fleet, each invested in its success. That gave Athens both the means and the morale to expand. For Sparta, the pattern was disturbing. A rival driven not by cautious elite control, but by restless energy from below. Every reform signaled momentum, and momentum was precisely what Sparta lacked. The contrast was significant for perception. While Athens constructed docks, harbors, and extensive walls, Sparta's greatest pride remained unchanged fields and formations. Sparta held the Peloponnese securely, but by resisting innovation, it gained an image of stagnation. Against Athens's confident restlessness, Sparta's conservatism appeared less like stability and more like decline. That image alone could cause anxiety, as if time itself was favoring one side over the other. Even incidents like Epidamnus or Sybota were less critical as causes than as confirmations of the larger trend. Allies mentioned them aloud. Corinth accused Athens of arrogance and expansion, echoing what Sparta already whispered privately. Hearing these accusations from allies gave voice to their own unsettled feelings. Fear, once acknowledged, became harder to ignore. Why consider fear more vital than reason? Because fear looks ahead, not just around. It imagines possible futures and treats them as if they were immediate threats. Sparta might list Athenian actions, the tribute, the fleets, the alliances, and debate their legality. But below those words was a feeling. Each year of waiting, the gap would grow larger. To stay meant to decline. To strike meant hardship, but also dignity and hope of maintaining their position. Fear tipped the scales until war seemed less costly than standing still. Here's an image. Imagine a farmer watching storm clouds in the distance. No rain has fallen. The fields remain safe. But fear of disaster fills his mind, and he acts as if the flood has already begun. Sparta saw Athens not in terms of current damage, but as a looming storm. Moves like the Athenian agreement with Corcyra added weight, but the decision to fight was driven by anticipation, not injury. Examine Athens's material rise closely. Its empire gathered wealth through the Delian League, enabling constant fleet expansion. These ships gave Athens dominance of the seas, enforcement power over hesitant allies, and access to trade and grain routes leading towards Sicily and beyond. Its democracy made these actions patriotic initiatives supported by broad citizen support. When Athens reconstructed its walls and invested its silver, it sent a clear message. This was no longer the fragile city of Salamis, but a state whose influence grew annually. Meanwhile, Sparta's reality was stark. It was feared that prolonged campaigns abroad might create opportunities for Helot revolts at home. This fear influenced every decision, restricting aggression outside the Peloponnese. Add to this the sense of being outflanked. Athens used its fleet to patrol the seas, while Sparta remained confined. If rebellion erupted while Athenian ships threatened supply routes, Sparta would face threats from both sides. That threat was at the core of Spartan calculations. This is why Thucydides said fear was the actual cause. Epidamnus and Sybota were sparks, but the deeper cause was the tension between Athenian momentum and Spartan stillness. Fear was not irrational. Fundamental material changes shaped it, but it turned those changes into urgency, making caution seem like surrender. Think again of the analogy: the elder fighter versus the younger. The elder knows he still has strength, but understands time favors the other. Waiting is the riskiest choice, as it gives the challenger more reach and strength. In this context, Sparta did not believe it could wait. Fighting now was dangerous, but delaying would lead to worse consequences. So, by the 430s, every report of Athens's new ships or revenues heightened Sparta's sense of dread. Allies delivered reminders, but the pressure was internal. The overwhelming thought that if they delayed further, their reputation and authority would slip away. Policy began to follow emotion. Once fear hardened, treaties lost their influence. That is why Thucydides' judgment feels enduring. When rival powers shift, treaties may still be in place, but minds are already unsettled. Balance of power is not just about numbers or land, but about how one state interprets the energy of another. In this view, the Peloponnesian War was born not from the necessity of law, but from the compulsion of dread. From fear, other effects followed. Fear spurred preparations. Preparations appeared as hostilities. hostilities prompted retaliation. A spiral was set in motion, no longer involving a single decision, but many interconnected ones, each seeming to confirm that the next step was unavoidable. Once Sparta felt that waiting was equal to decline, the chain was pulled forward. Fear, then, was the foundation. Diplomatic quarrels sparked the conflict, naval contests provided the scenes, but beneath it all was the steady pressure of Athens rising and Sparta concluding, act now or lose forever. It was not law, but fear. Fear shaped by material change that made war seem necessary. And once decisions are driven by fear, their consequences ripple out in ways no one can predict. One choice clashes with another, misperceptions obscure intentions, and soon the story grows far larger than any single step at its start. You can now see how quickly one decision puts pressure on the next. Historians often refer to this as the domino effect, because the choices of Epidamnus, Corcyra, Corinth, Athens, and finally Sparta aligned in such a way that once one was made, the chain continued without pause. The sequence is straightforward. Epidamnus fell into civil war and sought help. This sparked a quarrel between Corcyra and Corinth. Feeling cornered, Corcyra turned to Athens. In 433 BC, Athens agreed to a defensive pact. This directly led to the conflict at Sybota, where Athenian triremes intervened to protect Corcyra. Witnessing Athenian support increased Corinth's outrage, so Corinth took the grievance to Sparta. In Sparta, the complaints touched a nerve. Fear that Athens, expanding year by year, was a threat the Peloponnesian League could not ignore. This step-by-step sequence gradually laid the groundwork for a larger war. What makes this chain remarkable is that none of these actors set out to ignite a full-scale conflict. Epidamnus sought local relief. Corcyra wanted protection. Corinth aimed to defend its standing and pride. Athens sought to strike a balance between restraint and deterrence. Even Sparta, when first approached, preferred to delay its response. But each decision, rational on its own, restricted the options for the next step. The possibility to disengage diminished with each move until, for every player, retreat seemed more dangerous than advancing. Athens believed it was acting responsibly. It chose an epimachia, a limited defensive treaty, rather than a comprehensive military alliance. It was thought that a modest squadron of 10 ships would demonstrate caution. The plan was to appear minimal, so that any intervention could be justified as lawful and defensive under the 30 Years' peace. For Athenian leaders, it seemed like a careful middle ground, enough to uphold their reputation and stop Corinth from gaining strength, but still within the rules that maintained the peace. Corcyra's decision also seemed logical. Threatened by Corinth's fleet, it could not stand alone. In its view, calling for Athenian protection was not a provocation, but a matter of survival. Partnering with Athens appeared as insurance that preserved their autonomy when their independence was at risk. What Corcyra did not aim for was to draw the larger powers into a cycle of escalation whose end it could not control. Meanwhile, Corinth could not ignore Corcyra's defiance. Allowing a colony to reject their authority without consequences would weaken its influence with other allies. By responding to Epidamnus's appeal and confronting Corcyra, they believed they were enforcing order and safeguarding their prestige. The presence of Athens was not intended to change that calculation. To them, it was a matter of responding to insults and demonstrating strength. This perspective is significant because it shows how each party's reasoning, from their own point of view, made sense. Yet, when these decisions were considered together, they clashed. At Sybota, the contradiction was revealed. Athens claimed it only sent 10 triremes, adhering strictly to its defensive pact. Corinth argued that those same 10 triremes demonstrated Athens had breached neutrality. The identical action was explained in two irreconcilable ways, each consistent with the respective actor's perspective, yet each outrageously contradicting the other. You can picture it as a simple chain of falling dominoes, one tipping into the next. Epidamnus's discord extended to Corcyra. Corcyra leaned into Corinth, Corinth into Athens, and Athens into Sparta. No single domino was enough on its own, but together they formed a sequence that, once nudged, could not be kept upright. What made this sequence even more compelling was how each act limited the options for later retreat. Once Athens responded to Corcyra's plea, it could not withdraw without losing face. Once Corinth failed at Sybota, it could not back down without appearing weakened to its allies. Once Sparta heard Corinth's appeal, it could not stay idle without risking the stability of the Peloponnesian League. Every new event narrowed choices. At each stage, the actors believed they were defending their position. They aimed to deter weakness. However, together, they eliminated escape routes. Consider how perception, not just action, influenced this process. Athenians believed they were cautious, respecting the treaty's terms. Corinthians thought they were defending established rights and restraining defiance. Spartans thought they were carefully weighing options to protect their league's security. But perception is not shared. What seemed cautious in Athens appeared aggressive in Corinth. What seemed defensive in Corinth looked reckless to Sparta. With each interpretation clash, suspicion grew. The text of the 30 Years' Peace could not withstand these conflicting meanings. Another factor is pride. Corinth's anger was not solely based on legalities. Losing face at Sybota, especially against a colony once subordinate, intensified the sting. Conversely, Corcyra guarded its naval reputation tightly. A defeat would tarnish their independence beyond repair. Athens, having intervened, now feared what allies and rivals would think if it seemed to abandon Corcyra. Sparta feared that losing Corinth's trust would threaten the league it commanded. Pride was as powerful as fear. You can follow the causal chain clearly. From Epidamnus's civil war to Corcyra and Corinth conflict, to Athens drawn in by mutual defense to naval clash at Sybota, to Corinth's outrage reaching Sparta, to Sparta caught between caution and duty. This sequence of falling dominoes, as Thucydides shows, does not rely on a single mistake or plot. It is the outcome of interconnected choices, each influencing and reshaping the next. There is an important reminder here. Most of the actors aimed to avoid general war. They were not plotting to overthrow Greece. They were defending their status, honor, or autonomy. These motives seem understandable from their perspective. Yet, the overall result was the opposite of what each intended. Local reasoning led to a collective disaster. That is the core of the domino effect. And once the sequence gained momentum, even moderation could not guarantee success. Athens sent only 10 ships seeking minimal support. But to Corinth, even 10 was unacceptable. Too little to satisfy an ally, too much to reassure a rival. Half measures fueled both sides. In situations where perception surpasses legal fairness, compromise itself can appear as provocation. The Battle of Sybota demonstrated how fragile the arrangement had become. Athens saw its role as defensive. Corinth saw it as hostile. The conflict confirmed to Sparta that Athenian power was expanding and that alliance trust required action. The formal steps of escalation now carried significance beyond any single naval intervention. Corinth's grievance, heightened by defeat, became the foundation for Sparta to reconsider its stance. From that point, the conflict was no longer just a colonial dispute on distant waters. It transformed into an alliance politics of the deepest kind. Who could maintain credibility? Who could defend allies? And who could endure the shame of restraint? Epidamnus, Sybota, and Corinth's speeches were not isolated. They were links in a tightening chain reaching the very core of the Greek system. The outbreak of the Peloponnesian War was not the result of a secret conspiracy, but the consequence of events that none of the participants believed they were deliberately causing at the outset. Democracies in Epidamnus did not think they were pushing Athens and Sparta towards conflict. Envoys from Corcyra did not foresee that they were shifting the balance of power. Yet, these small decisions accumulated, leaving both great powers with limited options to retreat. The tragedy lies in how fear and pride influenced perceptions, turning treaties into mere formalities. The 30 Years' peace might have remained on paper, but its authority was crumbling under conflicting narratives. Each fresh grievance became a reminder not of negotiation, but of betrayal. As the dominoes fell, restraint appeared less as wisdom and more as weakness, making the move towards war increasingly difficult to resist. This is what historians mean when they talk about escalation as almost automatic. No one started with a plan to fight all of Greece. Still, every action demanded a reply. Each defense provoked an attack. The system gradually limited options until only one remained. War was not decided at a single gathering. It evolved through a series of cumulative decisions. Within these choices lies a broader lesson. The events surrounding Epidamnus reveal not only the delicate nature of peace in 5th century Greece, but also the broader pattern of how conflicts escalate when alliances, pride, and fear intertwine. What seemed like a minor quarrel on the fringes of the Greek world generated pressures that impacted every center of power. Later, we will reflect on why this matters beyond its own era, because the lesson from this chain of events extends beyond Greece. Why does a quarrel over a colony still resonate across centuries? The answer lies in what it revealed about fragile peace. The dispute at Epidamnus showed that treaties and alliances, however carefully crafted, can collapse when trust is thin and fear runs deep. These are not just ancient problems. They illustrate how states, then and now, weigh ambition and security against promises written on paper. The timeless lesson begins with an examination of how alliances function. Epidamnus may have been insignificant on its own, but once its internal quarrel drew Corcyra, Corinth, Athens, and then Sparta into its wake, the local dispute became systemic. The structure of alliances turned what might have remained contained into a chain of escalation. You can still see the pattern today. When security pacts bind larger powers to smaller partners, even regional disputes have the capacity to draw in greater actors. Treaties designed to offer mutual defense can amplify risks rather than mitigate them. Thucydides understood this, noting that the actual cause of the Peloponnesian War was not found in colony squabbles or treaty phrasing, but in something more profound: the rise of Athenian power and the fear that growth instilled in Sparta. This structural fear was significant because it influenced how each event was perceived. A plea for aid, a fleet sailing west, even a limited defensive pact, Sparta saw each as evidence of a trend it could not afford to ignore. Fear transforms small sparks into proof of imminent danger. That pattern, where the rise of one state alarms another into preemptive action, continues to define relations between rivals across many eras. Another enduring lesson is how perception governs outcomes as much as law. Athens insisted its pact with Corcyra was purely defensive. Corinth and Sparta called it arrogance, a breach in spirit if not in letter. Neither truth alone was decisive. What mattered was how each side chose to frame it. In international politics, perception is often the decisive currency. One act can appear restrained to your own eyes, but hostile from a rival's. Misinterpretation fuels escalation as reliably as raw military strength. The 30 Years' Peace highlights the gap between words and trust. On parchment, it included innovations designed to manage disputes. Arbitration was offered as a mechanism to settle disputes before they escalated into wars. Neutral states were given the right to join either bloc, a clause meant to respect city autonomy. Yet this same clause, intended as a guarantee of fairness, became a tool for competition. Epidamnus's decision to appeal across those lines confirmed how quickly choice could be seen as provocation. The treaty revealed the paradox. Flexibility invited rivalry when rivals already distrusted one another. The balance of power adds a third piece to the puzzle. Rising strength, wherever it occurs, puts pressure on others to respond. Sparta considered itself dominant on land, but watched anxiously as Athens built walls, harbors, and fleets. This disruption created fear, and that fear narrowed options. The idea remains valid. When one state expands rapidly, others often conclude that waiting is more dangerous than confronting. In the Greek case, it meant that even small quarrels gained disproportionate significance because they appeared to signal a shift in the entire balance. Honor also played its part. Corinth's outrage at Corcyra was not just about strategy, it was about being dismissed by a colony that owed it respect. That sense of dishonor intensified every wound, made compromise harder, and gave Sparta's appeal emotional weight. Honor, as an ancient word, might feel distant, but today the same impulse appears as prestige, credibility, and reputation. States act, sometimes costly and unwise, because they fear the appearance of weakness more than the material cost of action. Prestige can be as compelling a motive as security, so 3 lessons carry forward. First, treaties rest on trust, not just words. The 30 Years' Peace collapsed early, not because its design was flawed, but because neither side trusted the other to uphold more than the letter of the agreement. Agreements cannot replace the will to restrain. Second, perception matters as much as law. The same act can calm one side and outrage another, and escalation often stems from those misunderstandings. Third, in systems of tight alliances, even minor disputes can escalate quickly. Epidamnus was marginal in itself, but became the spark for a greater contest precisely because alliances drew larger powers into the quarrel. Think of treaties as bridges crossing a river. The cables and beams may look sturdy, and the plans precise. But if the riverbanks are eroded underneath, the bridge will collapse regardless of its design. In Greece, ambition, fear, and pride represented that erosion. They gradually undermined the ground beneath the 30 Years' Peace until no agreement could last. Peace is never stronger than the trust that supports it. This clarifies why Epidamnus is worth remembering. It demonstrates how fragile paper promises can be when one side is driven by ambition, the other by fear, and pride influences every insult. These forces turn legal texts into weapons and alliances into traps. Officials may insist that the treaty remains in force, yet each side interprets every incident as proof that the other cannot be trusted. That is the lesson of fragile peace. Agreements can delay conflict, but they cannot eliminate the emotions that make conflict appear inevitable. Nor should we overlook the role of misunderstanding. The Athenians believed they had acted carefully by forming only a defensive pact, sending just 10 triremes. But rivals judge based on perception, not intention. What seems cautious at home can appear aggressive abroad. Moderation is no shield if the other side perceives it as provocation. Misperception can escalate conflict as powerfully as any hostile action. The legacy of Epidamnus extends beyond Greek politics. It concerns how states interact when treaties, pride, alliances, and mistrust all come into play. Local disputes do not remain confined to their origin. Fear prompts rivals to act prematurely. Pride makes compromise seem like weakness. And treaties, even if drafted with perfect precision, cannot succeed without trust and restraint to uphold them. One final aspect of the peace structure highlights this point. The clause allowing neutral states to choose either alliance was meant to protect their autonomy. In reality, it enabled smaller powers to influence the balance between larger states. That freedom of choice made the system theoretically flexible, but practically volatile, as Epidamnus demonstrated. Peace frameworks that incorporate such leverage risk, becoming triggers for competition rather than safeguards against it. The key message remains clear but sobering. Written agreements alone are never sufficient. Perceptions, ambitions, and fears exert more substantial influence. Honor can amplify insults. Alliances can escalate disputes. Once these dynamics interact, fragile peace can quickly dissolve into turmoil. Understanding this chain helps explain how wars often start not as an inevitable outcome, but as the result of individual decisions. Choices may seem rational when considered in isolation. However, when linked together, they close off opportunities for retreat, making escalation feel unavoidable. This pattern, evident in the conflict around Epidamnus, serves as a warning from history. It ultimately leads to the final thought: wars are not caused by fate, but by the accumulation of decisions. The Peloponnesian War serves as a reminder of how interconnected choices during the 440s to 430s BC gradually limited options. No single dramatic mistake caused it. Instead, a series of rational actions, appeals, treaties, and interventions raised tensions until war seemed less risky than restraint. Thucydides noted that even well-crafted agreements could not withstand ambition, fear, and the pursuit of honor. We continue to live in a world where treaties rely on trust and where the rise of one power can disturb others.